Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by. I am back with the first in a 3-part card making series. In this series, I'm hoping that I can help you all overcome the fear of masking and creating these big gorgeous scenes just like this one. In this video, I'm going to show you how I plan it, how I use my masks, and how I stamp everything out. I'm really hoping that I can help y'all break this all down and show you that anybody could really make a card like this. It's not hard. It's just time consuming. And then when you really start going through your stash and digging out stamps that you wouldn't normally think would go together, it's just that much more fun. Now, a while back, I had done a guest design post for W+9, which is the card you see down below. I will have a link to that as well. And it was inspired by the card on top. And I really wanted to show you guys that you don't have to have 4 inches by 9 inches of real estate in order to build these big, beautiful scenes. 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 works just fine. I personally prefer working on a bigger canvas like that because I really enjoy packing in those details. But you don't have to do that. You can make it even more simple yet. You don't even have to put in as much detail as I did. The other thing I really enjoyed about this was, again, taking those stamps that you normally wouldn't use and pairing them with something out of the ordinary. Like the candies with the elephants, for instance. Those elephants should be big. You think of an elephant and you think of a large animal. Well, you pair it with those the jar and the balloons and all of those little goodies, and then once you have it in perspective, they look like they belong together, and it's just off the hook cute. So this guy, I literally threw this card together in about 5 minutes. I stamped the elephant with the flowers and the caterpillar and those little butterflies, and look at him. He looks like as large as an elephant should look. Now, I did this card a couple years ago, actually. This is the bear from Happy Mail, which is this stamp set right here. And I wanted to show you guys that not only could you use this stamp set for this particular scene, but it's all about perspective. This is Party Animal by W+9, and it would work just as well. Okay, so all of our stamps that we're going to be using today are from W+9. This one is a Pocketful Valentine. This one is Fresh Preserves. We're going to use that jar, and I'm going to show you how I get rid of that solid lid and make my own. And then we have our little elephants here. This is Unforgettable. This has got to be my favorite set ever from W+9. It is so adorable. This is Sweets and Treats. I was blown away when I saw this stamp set. I can think of so many different things you can do with it. You could even take just one of those cupcakes and a stand and do a really clean and simple card, maybe put a sentiment on the front, and you would be good to go in no time. Okay, so on to my favorite subject. I love masking, and these 3M full stick post-it notes are a huge time saver. You stamp one image on top, you pull off as many sheets as you need, and you cut them all out at once, and you're done. The other alternative, a good alternative, would be the Inkadinkadoo stamping mask paper. The only drawback to this is you would have to stamp it as many times as you need it and cut them out individually. So as you can see here, I have them all cut out, even my little itty bitties, because I really believe it's the details that make a scene. And once I have them all cut out, I put them on a scrap of cardstock, and then I have them all together. I don't lose them, and they don't get ruined, and it's really handy. The other thing I like to do is cut down a piece of copy paper to the size of my card panel, and I make myself a plan. Now, I did try to clean this up for you guys so you could have a better idea of what I was getting at here. So I did do some masking, others I didn't, but this is my plan, and because I like it, I'm actually going to follow that today. I'm going to line up my stamp on top of my plan, and then I'm going to stamp it just like that. So I don't have to eyeball anything. It takes out the guesswork. I know exactly where I want everything, and it makes things go so much faster. Now, I don't normally do this, but for the purpose of this video, I made another copy of my plan and I colored it in. Now this is in rainbow order, so pink, red, orange, yellow, so on and so forth. And when I say that everything in your foreground gets stamped first and then you work your way to the back, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So I stamped everything in pink first and then red, etc., etc. Now, I'll be honest, I used a MISTI stamping tool, so that really helps a bunch, but you can totally do this with acrylic blocks. You don't need to have a stamp positioning tool to do it. It'll still work. It'll just take a little bit longer. And I also have a line drawn there at the bottom, and I did that on purpose because I wanted you to see that I need that, so when I'm done stamping all of my images, I make sure that I have enough space to ground all of them. Otherwise, they're just going to look like they're floating out there in nowhere. And like you can see on the one on the top, it looks like almost like they're sitting on the counter, and that's what I was going for. I wanted this little party scene to look like maybe they were all partying like it was 1999 at a birthday party or whatever. I let my imagination go. Regardless, I needed to make sure that I had enough room to ground them. The most time-consuming thing when making cards like this is honestly cutting out the mask. Now, the 3M full stick Post-it notes make a huge difference. And it seems crazy to cut out these itty-bitty cherries, but I promise it's worth it. You'll be glad you did. Now, this is another card I hope to share with y'all soon. It's the same principle, just a different approach. The other card we've stamped across the panel. This one is from the center, working our way to the edges of the panel. You start with the pink peony, then you stamp the red anemones, the orange petunias, so on and so forth until you have all of your images done. Again, with a stamping tool, you can do more than one stamp at a time and it goes that much faster, but it's still doable with an acrylic block. And don't be afraid to come up with a plan before you actually start your card. Copy paper is inexpensive. You've spent good money on your stamps. Use them to your advantage and use them until you're comfortable with them. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, here's both of these plans side by side. You can see that they're both exactly the same principle, just different approaches. And my youngest daughter suggested that I make these look all spiffy for you folks. So that's what the color keys and the black cardstock is for. Here is the finished card with the anemones, peonies, and petunias. And is anybody else thinking Pioneer Woman? I don't know. Anyway, the other thing I would like to show you is when I make a card, I like to take all of my stamps out of the packaging and put them on an acrylic block. That way they're handy, they don't get lost, I don't have to struggle with any packaging, and it really helps keep me on track. And then also, because I'm OCD like that, I will take another block, and as I stamp out my card, as soon as I'm done with each image, I will put it on the other block and get them out of my way. And it really helps keep me organized, and then I don't feel as though I am struggling as much to build this large scene. I have my Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock cut down to 4 inches by 9 inches. Again, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 would be just fine, or 5 by 5, any shape we would like would be just fine. I'm taking my T ruler, and there is an exact science here for me, folks. I realized a while back that on the centimeter side of my T ruler, where the numbers stick up, that's almost perfect. And I use this frequently for borders and also for what I'm going to do here now, which is to draw that line so I can ground all of my images as I finish up my card. So I'm placing my ruler onto my card panel, and I'm going to line those numbers up right there at the bottom. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect for this particular scene. You wouldn't notice it if it was slightly crooked. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Those numbers are big enough that it sure helps a bunch to get it lined up, but it's not a big deal if you don't. Now I'm making sure to keep that pencil line fairly light because I want to be able to erase this later as I finish up my card. I'm using the Memory MISTI In fact, when I decided to make this card, I intentionally made it 4 inches by 9 inches because I knew I had the memory MISTI, and I knew I could fit my panel into a stamp positioning tool this big. If you don't have one, just make sure that your card panel is large, or is as small, I'm sorry, as whatever your stamp positioning tool is. It's not a big deal. So now what I'm doing is I've put both my card panel and my plan inside my MISTI, and I have the plan on top because I'm going to use that to line up my stamps. Now, as you can see here, we're starting with the pink layer because those are our foreground images. And I'm going to lay my stamps on top, make sure they're lined up as they possibly can be. You would normally need to put your head right over the top of it to make sure they're lined up perfectly. I suppose it doesn't really need to be. It's not a big deal if there's a little bit, if they're not exactly like the plan. There's a little bit of wiggle room here. And also, I didn't want my head in the way as I was trying to videotape this. As it was, my head kept knocking my camera stand. So I'm just placing them on there. I decided to work from left to right on my card panel as I stamp this. You could choose any side you want. You could start in the middle if you would like. That would be fine. Since I'm going to be Copic coloring, I'm using Hero Arts Intense Black ink. This is one of my favorite Copic friendly inks. And as you can see, I have 4 images stamped at once. It makes things go so much faster. But again, it's fine. If you don't have a stamping tool, use an acrylic block and just work your way across. The other thing I make sure to do is to place all my masks at once. This way I don't forget anything. And then I move on to my second layer. Now we're looking at everything in red. And this will also go fairly quickly because we have different styles of cupcakes, which means different stamps. And we can stamp those all at the same time, just like this. So I have them all laid out on my plan. Make sure you pull your plan out of there before you stamp your card panel. Otherwise, you're not getting anywhere. And then ink up your stamps and then stamp it. If you need to stamp it several times, that's the beautiful thing about a stamping tool, is you can stamp over it again and then your card panel doesn't get ruined because you didn't get it lined up perfectly. And as you can see on some of these images, they're not perfect. Now, me personally, sometimes I'll leave that. I won't worry about it because I'll just outline them again later as I finish things up. Sometimes I'll stamp it again. Now we're moving on to the orange. So we're working our way towards the background. And again, it's the same principle. You line up your stamps, you ink them up, and you stamp them. I also wanted to point out, you see where those little orange slices are tucked back behind that elephant? I like to do that on cards because it's unexpected. Then things don't look so flat. It's the little details, again, that get tucked in there that make a huge impact on your final card. When I started editing this video, I seriously considered only showing you how I stamped a couple of layers, and then I thought that I would edit the rest out and call it a day. However, I know that some of you are just like I am, and visual is better, so I decided to leave it all in. For those of you that are absolutely bored to tears, I don't blame you. You're welcome to fast forward until almost the end. It's okay. We're actually not that far off from being done with our stamping. The next thing I want to show you is how I stamped out that jar. Now, I didn't do anything special, and unfortunately, I did lose the footage on exactly how I did it, so hopefully I can explain it well enough that you can do the same thing that I did. Now, you can see that the top of the jar is solid, and I don't want that. I want a clear threaded top on my jar. So I just inked it up to the edges of the jar. As you see here, there's no top on it. I just made sure I was really careful as I inked that up. And then I took some of my scraps of my Post-it labeling tape and I made sure everything was blocked off around it. And I'm using the hearts from a Pocketful Valentine because I want to make it look like there's little heart candies inside of this jar. Now my masking isn't perfect. Some of those hearts actually do go outside of the jar, but I'm not going to worry about it. I know that I can cover that up later and nobody's going to notice the difference. One of the beautiful things about making card scenes like this is that there is so much going on that it doesn't necessarily look busy, but the eye can't necessarily take in all of the details. So if you have minor mistakes, don't beat yourself up, just keep going. You can either cover it up later, fix it later, or just don't even worry about it. Nobody's going to even notice. They're just going to be amazed that you have elephants chilling with candies and lollipops and cupcakes. So just keep going, folks. Now I'm stamping these one last time on this side of the jar because I want to make this guy look like it's really full of candy. And then I'm going to show you how I made a lid for the top of it. I put my mask back on there and I'm taking a Copic multi-liner and I'm just tracing around the edge of the mask. And then when I pull that off, I add in some threads, and those are basically just straight lines that run across the top of the where the lid would be, so it looks like you could put a lid on it, so it looks threaded. And you'll be able to see that in the second video in this series. I'm just getting the last of my images stamped on there. One thing to note is that I do take the Copic multi-liner and I extend those sticks on those lollipops later on. So I hadn't actually decided what I was going to do yet with my background, but if I had, I would have left the masks on and done all of my ink blending first and then my coloring. As it is, you'll see in the next video that I take all the masks off, do my Copic coloring, and then put them back on to do my background, but it's no big deal. Okay, so that's everything for today's video. On my next video, you're going to see where I color everything in and do my ink blended background. And in the third video, it's going to be about finishing off this card. What's really great about scenes like this is because they have so much detail packed into them, it doesn't take a whole lot to finish them off. You really don't need to worry about embellishments or anything like that because these really speak for themselves without all of the extras. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, folks, as well as head on over to my blog for more details and product links. As always, I hope you enjoyed my card today. Thanks again for stopping by to see me. Until next time.